ओम परतत्वे सदा लीनो रामकृष्ण समाज्ञया यो धर्म स्थापन रतो वीरेशम तम नमाम्यहम. We are studying Swami Vivekananda's Jnana Yoga, and this is the last lecture, as I told you, the real and the apparent man, delivered in New York, 6th February 1896. And I have told you, the general format of this lecture is that Swamiji says that Advaita is not the only Vedantic system, but Dvaita, Vishtadvaita and Advaita, that way it is developed. Now between them comes this Buddhism. That is, all the Dvaita theories, Swamiji, Vishtadvaita is nothing but Dvaita in a refined way. So Swamiji will state them, tell them, and then talk about Buddhism, which contradicts them, and then he will talk of Advaita, which reconciles both the positions. That was the point which we are reading. We go back to the beginning of that para. Let me first take up the dualists and try to present to you their position with regard to the soul and its destiny. What is the nature of the soul and where does it go? Next, the system that contradicts them. It shows that that is not true. And lastly, let us try to find the harmony which non-dualism will bring to us. Harmony means it will show that something of this is true, something of this also is true, and then what is the real ultimate truth. So that Swamiji will show. Now the dualist good points, positive points. The soul of man, because it is separate from the mind and body, that Swamiji has already shown. Body is physical matter, mind is subtler matter. The soul of man, because it is, soul means the real nature of man, because it is separate from the mind and body, because it is not composed of Akasha and Prana, that Swamiji has already shown, that the subtlest matter is called Akasha and the force which plays upon it is called Prana. Must be, because it is not composed of Akasha and Prana, must be immortal. This dualistic theory Swamiji is telling that the soul of man is immortal. It will not die because it is not a compound. Why? What do we mean by mortality? Decomposition. And that is only possible for things that are the result of composition. Anything that is made of 2 or 3 ingredients must become decomposed. That alone which is not the result of composition can never become decomposed and therefore can never die. So, very simple logic Swamiji has given about it. It is immortal. It has been existing throughout eternity. So, the meaning of immortality Swamiji is explaining, not only it cannot die, but it never came into being. It has been existing always. Because if it comes into being means a compound, and if it comes into being it will decompose. But because it is not made a compound, so it will not die. That means it has never come into existence. It is always existing. It is immortal. It has been existing throughout eternity. It is uncreate, ajo. It has not been created from something, because that becomes a matter or composite thing. So, it is uncreate. In Sanskrit, ajo, unborn, uncreate. Beautiful word Swamiji has used this. Every item of creation is simply a composition. No one ever saw creation come out of nothing. So, from nothing we cannot create anything. We have never seen such thing. So, something gets combined and something becomes newly in appearance. That is creation. And because it is not a combined thing, it is eternal. All that we know of creation is the combination of already existing things into newer form. Form becomes new. That being so, the soul of man being simple, simple means not a compound, that is called simple, must have been existing forever and it will exist forever. Is the dualist theory going on? When this body falls off, the soul lives on. According to the Vedantist, that means dualists are of different types. Now he is talking primarily of the Vedantic dualist. So up till now what Swamiji has said is common to many dualists. According to the Vedantist, when this body dissolves, the vital forces of the man go back to his mind. And the mind becomes dissolved, as it were, into the prana. That day question was asked. It has become very clear here. This gross manifested body and the gross manifested force, both of them go back to the mind. From mind they have come. And mind itself is a combination of the subtler form of matter and the subtler form of the force. And the mind becomes dissolved, as it were, into the prana. Mind becomes dissolved in the prana. That is the sukshmatara, subtler matter, subtler force. And that prana enters into the soul of man, and the soul of man comes out, clothed as it were, with what they call the fine body, the mental body or spiritual body, as you may like to call it. So the mind, the seed of the mind, gets resolved into that force. And that life force enters into the soul of man, according to the dualist. And that soul of man which contains the force of the seed of mind, that is called. And the soul of man comes out clothed, as it were, with the covering, with what they call the fine body. The same thing is called by different names. Fine because we cannot perceive it. The mental body, because it is mainly made of the mind. Or spiritual body. That is the way it is put, because it is connected with the soul. So it is the spiritual body, as you may like to call it, because in the other forms of religion, it is called spiritual body. In this body are the sanskaras of the man. Sanskaras, Swamiji is explaining now, impressions. What are the sanskaras? The mind is like a lake. Why like a lake? Lake is liquid. And so it is mobile, becomes formed into waves. Mind, because it is very subtle, so it is mobile, and waves are made into that. So it is always compared to a lake. And every thought is like a wave upon that lake. Just as in the lake, waves rise and then fall down and disappear, so these thought waves are continually rising in the mind stuff and then disappearing. Mind is the name of a particular function of the mind, and the whole of the mind is called mind stuff, chitta. In the mind stuff and then disappearing, but they do not disappear forever. From the surface they go away, so we do not see them. Just like waves in the ocean or a lake. They become finer and finer, but they are all there. Finer and finer cannot be perceived, but they are all there. ready to start up at another time when called upon to do so, through memory or through rising of the impressions. So that is the force also is there. That is why along with the force it had gone. Memory is simply calling back into wave form some of these thoughts which have gone into that finer state of existence. Some of them which come up, then becomes the memory. Finer state of existence. Thus, everything that we have thought, every action that we have done is lodged in the mind. Both action and thought, they both go into the mind. Because behind action always thought is there. It is all there in fine form. And when a man dies, the sum total of these impressions is in the mind, which again works upon a little fine material as a medium. So it requires a medium to work upon. So that seed of the mind is there. The soul, clothed as it were with these impressions, and the fine body passes out, and the destiny of the soul is guided by the resultant of all the different forces represented by the different impressions. So different impressions, they every has a force and a directed force, and so the resultant is what happens. Sum total. According to us, there are three different goals for this soul. According to us means according to the Vedantic dualists. Their side Swamiji is representing at that time. Those that are very spiritual, when they die, follow the solar rays and reach what is called the solar sphere, through which they reach what is called the lunar sphere, and through that they reach what is called the sphere of lightning, and there they meet with another soul who is already blessed. This is the full description from Chandogya Upanishad, 8th chapter, also in the 5th chapter. So, these are the spheres. They are very subtle spheres, not physical. So, after reaching that sphere, one who is already blessed, that means from the Brahmaloka it comes down to that electric sphere and takes this man with him. That is the description. And there they meet with another soul which is already blessed, and he guides the newcomer forward to the highest of all spheres, which is called the Brahmaloka, Sagun Brahman, the sphere of Brahma. Brahma and Brahma, there is difference. Brahma is neutral gender, Brahman is transcendent immanent reality, while Brahma is the manifested form of it, called a Trinity, part of Trinity, Creator. Very rare temples of Brahma. In India, near Ajmer, there is a place called Pushkar, and there it exists. Just for your information, I am little digressing. There is a Brahma Mandir in Pushkar, near Ajmer. And behind the Brahma Mandir is a hill. And Brahma Shakti, Savitri, not Satyavan Savitri, Brahma Shakti Savitri. She has a temple on that hill behind Brahma. And our dear Holy Mother, Sarda Devi, when she went there on a pilgrimage, she climbed up that hill, very steep hill. And when she reached there, she went into Samadhi. In memory of that, various attempts have been made. But now, Kshatriya Ashrama has built a temple. The worship will be by those pujaris. And it very in a divine way, one should say, it got the idol made. They had gone to, we have heard of some divine intervention in some idol coming from foreign, but this also is a story. Our Maharaj, with the help of experts in Bengal, went to that village where the expertest, you may say, the sculptor is there. And they asked him, can you make a image idol of the Holy Mother? He said, I have made one already for somebody, he did not take it. Will you see it? And like that we got the idol. And the installation is on 8th of October. It is ready now. Anyway. So Brahma name came, so I told you this, the sphere of Brahma. There these souls attain to omniscience and omnipotence. Omniscience means they become all-knower, like Brahma. And they become omnipotent means all-power, like Brahma. Become almost as powerful and all-knowing as God Himself. Almost, why almost? What is wanting? And they reside there forever according to the dualist. Or according to the non-dualist, this much non-dualist also accept. That is why Swamiji has said us. They become one with the universal at the end of the cycle. So at the end of a cycle, when Brahma gets dissolved, they also get dissolved in the universal. So it is called Krama Mukti. This is the one class of persons who are very spiritual. That means their consciousness has changed. One thing I may tell you again, that the form of God which we have been worshipping, anybody, he sees that form of God. And so this Brahmaloka also is called Satyaloka. By the Vaishnavas it is called Vaikuntha, they will reside with Vishnu. The Shaivas call it Kailasha, where they will live with Shiva. Brahmaloka I already told you. And these days we have not made it, but in our mind it is Ramakrishna Loka. The talk is very current, you might have heard, between sadhus of Ramakrishna Mission. We will go to Ramakrishna Loka. That means they will see God in the form of Ramakrishna and reside there forever, till the kalpa goes away. So, that is the common point, though names are different. And you may be interested to know that branch of Hinduism which is called Sikhism, for them that is the highest goal. And they call it Sachakhanda. Satyaloka becomes Sachakhanda. This is different from heaven. Heaven, about heaven Swamiji will tell now. This in general is called Devaloka. Because the Swamiji has talked of the highest spiritual, but if they have meditated upon some form of God, Agni or Chandra or all that, they go to his loka. But the highest spiritual people go to Brahma Loka. The next class of people, the next class of persons who have been doing good work with selfish motives. Deferred payment, that means now we will be self-controlled and do everything good for others, but we have keen to get the fruit after we leave this body, which is a must for everybody. And so when we leave this body, we will go to heaven, enjoy. The next class of persons who have been doing good work with selfish motives are carried by the results of their good work when they die to what is called lunar sphere, where there are various heavens. And there they acquire fine bodies. Various heavens are there, grades are there, according to the good work done. And there they acquire fine bodies, the bodies of gods. Not gross like us, their enjoyments also are not gross like us. They become gods, plural, huh? And live there and enjoy the blessings of heaven for a long period. Long period according to the amount of good work they have done, but finite. And after that period is finished, the old karma is again upon them. This is called the residual karma. They have done some good works, so they have gone to heaven. But they have done so many other works. So after that enjoyment is over, they have to come down. And after that period is finished, the old karma is again upon them, and so they fall back again to the earth. And the coming down process is described beautifully in the Chandogya Upanishad. Those who are interested to study this in English, I refer to revered Swami Satprakashanandaji's book, How a Man is Reborn. He has described this according to the Chandogya Upanishad. Small booklet is there, How a Man is Reborn. And so they fall back to the earth, they come down through the spheres of air and clouds and all these various regions, and at last reach the earth through raindrops. There on the earth, they attach themselves to some cereal. Cereal spelling with C, huh? Cereal means grain, which is eventually eaten by some man who is fit to supply them with material to make a new body. Actually, man, Samjaya describes human being. In the details, in Chandogya Upanishad, male person, and then he injects this into the female, and there they get the body. Fit to supply them with material to make a new body. The soul, according to its mind, makes up the new body. Material is supplied by parents. Now this is the second class. The last class, namely, the wicked, when they die, become ghosts or demons and live somewhere midway between the heaven, lunar sphere and this earth. That is the state of affairs, wicked people. Some try to disturb mankind, some are friendly, and after leaving, ghost means without the gross body they stay. And after living there for some time, they also fall back to the earth and become animals. So lower than man, because they were wicked. After living for some time in an animal body, they get released and come back and become men again, and thus get one more chance to work out their salvation. There is nothing like eternal heaven or eternal hell. These are where the sanskaras get exhausted, and then they get a human body again, and they get another chance. We see then that those who have nearly attained to perfection, in whom only very little of impurity remains, go to the Brahmaloka. Through the rays of the sun, those who were a middling sort of people who did some good work here with the idea of going to heaven, go to the heavens in the lunar sphere, and there obtain God bodies. But they have again to become men, and so have one more chance to become perfect. So when they become gods, they also have to become man. Maybe if they are those that are very wicked become ghosts and demons, and then they may have to become animals. After that they become men again and get another chance to perfect themselves. So we find then the goal is perfection. Now, the subtle mechanism inside Swamiji is explaining. This earth is called the Karma Bhumi, the sphere of karma. As men, what we do is along with a will. I am doing this. That gives all the results. In the animal body or in Deva body, it is the exhaustion of the karma which you have gained impression in the human body. In the dog body or a tiger body, we do not do any karma newly because there is no will as I am this being, I am this doer. Instinct is what we call it. Instinctive life. That means the sanskaras of that particular work get exhausted there. The sphere of karma. Here alone man makes his good or bad karma and also gains knowledge. When a man wants to go to heaven and does good works for that purpose, he becomes a god and does not as such store up any bad karma. He just enjoys the effects of the good work he did on earth. As God, whatever he does is not a new karma, good or bad. He just enjoys the effects of the good work he did on earth, and when this good karma is exhausted, there comes upon him the resultant force of all the evil karma he had previously stored up in life. So there cannot be good without evil, there cannot be evil without good. So the good has resulted in heaven, but the remaining evil is there, it brings him down. There comes upon him the resultant force of all the evil karma he had previously stored up in life, and that brings him down again to this earth. In the same way, those that become ghosts, so one cannot do evil karma completely, it has some good everywhere. Relatively we call it good and bad. Those that become ghosts remain in that state, not giving rise into fresh karma. Whether it troubles us or is friendly to us, there is no fresh karma there. But suffer the evil results of their past misdeeds and later on remain for a time in an animal body without causing any fresh karma. Otherwise, what will happen? If in a dog body is a dog karma, then eternally will remain that dog. But if that is not true, the dog sanskaras become exhausted. When that period is finished, they too become men again. The states of reward and punishment due to good and bad karmas are devoid of the force of generating fresh karmas. That force is due to the doer consciousness. They have only to be enjoyed or suffer. Very clear statement Swamiji is making. He is explaining dualism to us, and that part is accepted by the Advaitis also. They will add, so long as we are in Maya, so long as we have the wrong consciousness of dualism, this is what will happen. If there is any extraordinary good or an extraordinary evil karma, it bears fruit very quickly. Example, practical example in front of our eyes, Pandavas and Kauravas. Kauravas had done evil action upon evil action endlessly almost, but they fought and died in the battle. That is the best karma a Kshatriya can do. So as a result of that, they went to heaven. Pandavas had done good action throughout their life, but there must have been some evil actions. So they did not reach the heaven with the body. Yudhishthira alone was almost perfect. And so, when he was taken to heaven, he saw the Kauravas there and not his brothers and wife. He said, your calculation is wrong. I don't want to stay here. I want to go where my brothers are there. So they took him to hell. He could not even enter, he could not bear the stench of that place. That much was his suffering. That much was his suffering due to very, very small evil returning to him. And so, that his Narakvas was over. And before him the Pandavas had died and they were in hell for some evil in them. And when he was taken back to Swarga, he found the Pandavas there. And Kauravas went to Swarga. But that point of time only, then they would be born lower than any man. So that is the whole story. And that story I told you in the Mahabharata, the theory Swamiji is telling here. For instance, if a man has been doing many evil things all his life, but does one good act, the result of that good act will immediately appear. But when that result has been gone through, all the evil acts must produce their results also. All men who do certain good and great acts, but the general tenor of whose lives have not been correct, will become gods. And after living for some time in God bodies, enjoying the powers of gods, they will have again to become men. When the power of the good acts is that finished, the old evil comes up to be worked out. Those who do extraordinarily evil acts have to put on ghost and devil bodies, and when the effect of those evil actions is exhausted, the little good action which remain associated with them make them again become man. The way to Brahmaloka, from which there is no more fall or return, is called Devayana. That is the way to God. The way to heaven is known as Pitrayana. That is the way to the fathers. So Swamiji has given the technical terms also. Man, therefore, according to the Vedanta philosophy, dualism, also accepted by the Advaitis by adding that so long as he has the wrong knowledge. Man, therefore, according to the Vedanta philosophy, is the greatest being that is in the universe, and this world of work the best place in it, because only herein is the greatest and the best chance for him to become perfect. So perfection he can gain here, point of no return. Angels are gods. In Christianity, these gods are called angels. So Swamiji has used that term also. Angels are gods, whatever you may call them, have all to become men. Whatever you may call them according to the different systems, have all to become men if they want to become perfect. This is the great center, the wonderful poise and the wonderful opportunity, this human life. Poise means good and bad are equal here, and so that is a balance and you get a chance. So Swamiji has explained the nature of the soul and its destiny according to the dualist. We come next to the other aspect of philosophy. There are Buddhists who deny the whole theory of the soul that I have just been propounding. Soul itself is not there in Buddhism. So they deny this totally. What use is there, says the Buddhist, to assume something as the substratum, as the background of this body and mind? Adhar. body and mind may be foisted upon it. We experience only body and mind. So there is need to assume something. Why may we not allow thoughts to run on? Thoughts, impressions, they run on. We do not require a soul to get attached to it. Why admit a third substance beyond this organism composed of mind and body? A third substance called the soul. What is its use? Is not this organism sufficient to explain itself? Why take a third something? These arguments are very powerful. What is the point here, do you know? All those who believe in a soul of transmigration never have seen their soul. None of us have seen our Atman, and we have theories only, inferential theories only, and that the whole crux is a wrong knowledge. If we had seen the nature of our soul, we would have found that it is Brahman only. And that is the argument of the Buddhists. They do not talk about Brahman. You have never seen your soul. So what is the use of assuming it? Mind and body will explain themselves. Because that is the only thing we experience. So Swami says these arguments are very powerful. This reasoning is very strong. So far as outside research goes, we see that this organism is a sufficient explanation of itself. At least many of us see it in that light. We can see that rationally this organism is sufficient to explain itself. Why then need there be a soul as substratum, as a something which is neither mind nor body, but stands as a background for both body and mind and body? Let there be only mind and body. Body is the name of a stream of matter continuously changing. That is Buddhist. Body is the name of a stream of matter continuously changing. Stream. There is nothing continuous. What is continuous? Change is continuous. So that they call the stream. Mind is the name of a stream of consciousness or thought continuously. Consciousness as reflected in the mind, not real consciousness. Actually in mind there are thoughts. So Swamiji said consciousness or thought. Continuously changing. The mind is continuously changing. One way of the mind is not present when I am eating. The very I is defined as eating. I am playing. They say that I is gone. That I was defined as eating. This I is defined as playing. So this I is only an appearance according to the stream. The mental wave has changed. Old wave has gone. New wave has come. So the I is associated with the new wave. What produces the apparent unity between these two? Mind and body? This unity does not really exist, let us say. Let us say means Buddhistic argument. Take for instance a lighted torch and whirl it rapidly before you. That is the common example taken by the Buddhists, Alata. And Gaudapada used it in his Karikas and called it Alata Shanti. I will explain that presently. Take for instance a lighted torch and whirl it rapidly before you. You see a circle of fire. The circle does not really exist, but because the torch is continuously moving, it gives the appearance of a circle. So there is no unity in this life. Nothing is combined with nothing. It is a mass of matter continuously rushing down, and the whole of this matter you may call one unity, but no more. The continuity of the change itself you call as one unit. Actually, there is nothing unit. So is mind. Each thought is separate from every other thought. It is only the rushing current that lives behind the illusion of unity. You know, in a cinematographic film, now faster things are there, but up till recently, each frame appears for 1/16th of a second, and a continuous scene, frame after frame comes, and in our eyes the impression remains as a permanent thing. There is nothing continuity in the film. The frame remains for 1/6th of a second, 1/16th. Another frame comes, another frame. So it is a series of photos. Now these videos come. In the video, they are resolved to still finer elements, but they are different elements all the same. In cricket, you know, whether a player has been stumped out or run out, the umpire cannot decide. So he refers to the third umpire. He has TV before him and playback is there. Now analyzes frame by frame. And if in a frame the ball has hit the stump, the bat has not reached the crease, then he is out. So frame by frame can be separated. There is no continuity. This universal phenomenon of body and mind is all that really is. Do not posit something behind it. You will find that this Buddhist thought has been taken up by certain sects and schools in modern times. And all of them claim that it is new, their own invention. Very recently in America, a system has come. Man is a destined animal. Nothing can do. There is nothing called freedom, there is nothing called consciousness, and they say it is new. In Swamiji's time also they said it is new, and it is old Buddhistic thought. Even Buddhistic were they not the first person to think about it. They postulated it. This thought is eternal. You will find that this Buddhist thought has been taken up by certain sects and schools in modern times, and all of them claim that it is new, their own invention. This has been the central idea of most of the Buddhist philosophers. Buddhist philosophers differ. Some people say the external world exists and we perceive it. Some people say the external world exists but we only infer it. Some people say only the impressions in the mind exist, there is nothing external. And some people say because it is Kshanabhangavad, so nothing exists. So this has been the central idea of most of the Buddhist philosophers, that this world is itself all-sufficient, that you need not ask for any background at all. All that is this sense universe. What is the use of thinking of something as a support to this universe? The dualist will go on imagining. Support to this earth is Vasuki's snake. Everything is the aggregate of qualities. Why should there be a hypothetical substance in which they inhere? So all the dualists have the substance and qualities. Substance in which qualities inhere. The Buddhist says you are experiencing only the qualities. Other than Shabda, Sparsha, Rupa, Rasa, Gandha, we cannot experience anything normally. You are assuming a substance. You have never seen that substance. Only the Advaitists will say we have seen. We do not call it substance. as a background of quality, we call it the reality. And reconciliation is in this sense that what you say, the Buddhist, is true. In what sense it is true? When we are experiencing the qualities, we are not experiencing the reality. When we are experiencing the reality, we are not experiencing the qualities. And that is why the Supreme is called Nirguna Brahman. But in our experience, these qualities are there, and the assumption of a substance is there. The idea of substance comes from the rapid interchange of qualities, not from something unchangeable which exists behind them. We see how wonderful some of these arguments are, and they appeal easily to the ordinary experience of humanity. Everything changing. In fact, not one in a million can think of anything other than phenomena, appearance. Phenomena is appearance. 1 in a million. 1 in a million means the Advaitin. To the vast majority of men, nature appears to be only a changing, whirling, combining, mingling mass of change. Yes, that is what is our experience. On analysis, our mind changes and we do not experience the change also. The sharper minds change like this, experience like this. Few of us ever have a glimpse of the calm sea behind. We have never seen that. For us it is always lashed into waves. This universe appears to us only as a tossing mass of waves. Thus we find these two opinions. One is that there is something behind both body and mind which is an unchangeable and immovable substance, unchanging in itself. Immovable means change outside, change of place. And the other is that there is no such thing as immovability or unchangeability in the universe. It is all change and nothing but change. The solution of this difference comes in the next step of thought, namely the non-dualist. Now Swamiji will explain the non-dualist thought, how it reconciles. It says that the dualists are right in finding something behind all as a background which does not change. We cannot conceive change without there being something unchangeable. When we conceive change, it is based upon our assuming something unchangeable, otherwise we cannot assume, we cannot conceive of change. Relatively less change, we see the faster change. We are standing on a platform and we see the train moving. If the platform was not there, we would not have seen the motion of the train even. And if the platform is moving, the earth is moving, because something is constant. The sun is constant, so we can see the movement of the earth. Ultimately, we conceive of the pole star, which also moves in a smaller circle. So everywhere, if we analyze our perception, something less moving or non-moving is necessary even to observe the change. So, what is the missing link? You say that everything is changing. If you, the experiencer, also has changed, you cannot have memory. You cannot have connection. If you have gone with that and this new you has come, what connects them? So, the perceiver cannot change. That Advaita will propound now. But Buddhists are important in the sense, what we falsely hold to be permanent is not permanent. We can only conceive of anything that is changeable by knowing something which is less changeable, and this also must appear more changeable in comparison with something else which is less changeable, and so on, until we are bound to admit that there must be something which never changes at all. Otherwise, you cannot experience the change. The whole of the manifestation must have been in a state of non-manifestation, must have been in a state of non-manifestation, calm and silent, being the balance of opposite forces, so to say, when no force operated. Because force acts when a disturbance of the equilibrium comes in. So it is explained through this. This universe is ever hurrying on to return to that state of equilibrium again. If we are certain of any fact whatsoever, we are certain of this, that behind everything there is calm, it gets disturbed and goes back to that calmness. When the dualists claim that there is a something which does not change, they are perfectly right. But their analysis that it is an underlying something which is neither the body nor the mind, a something separate from both, is wrong. So these philosophers have created this trinity, body, mind and soul. When you pursue the body, we are not pursuing mind. When we are pursuing the mind, we are not pursuing the soul. If we are pursuing the soul, we are not pursuing mind or body. So substance is only one, not three. The assumption of three is only philosophically or hypothetically being done. This is the most important point of reconciliation. Yes, substance is there, not separate from the body and mind. Substance only is there, which appears as the body, appears as the mind. But their analysis that it is an underlying something which is neither the body nor the mind, a something separate from both, is wrong. So far as the Buddhists say that the whole universe is a mass of change, they are perfectly right. So long as I am separate from the universe, as long as I stand back and look at something before me, so long as there are two things, the looker on and the thing looked upon, it will appear always that the universe is one of change. Beautiful analysis. The looker on is there. Continuously changing all the time. But the reality is that there is both change and changelessness in this universe. To the externalized vision, it is change. To the vision which has the reality, it is not change. Appearance is changing. It is not that the soul and the mind and the body are three separate important points. That is what we assume. That is what the philosophers put us in delusion. For the organism made of these three is really one. It is the same thing which appears as the body, as the mind and as the thing beyond mind and body. But it is not at the same time all these. He who sees the body does not see the mind even. He who sees the mind does not see the body, he calls the soul. He who sees the mind does not see that which he calls the soul. And he who sees the soul, for him the body and mind have vanished. If we can see the non-changing self, mind and body has vanished. Unless the seeker eye becomes absolutely unchanging, not changing with the mind and body, till then it cannot perceive the reality. Till it becomes one with the reality, cannot perceive it. And then it will find that there is no change. That is called the Nirvikalpa Samadhi. He who sees only motion never sees absolute calm. And he who sees absolute calm, for him motion has vanished. So both are there according to the level of ignorance which we see. the wrong knowledge that we have. Example, permanent example of the non-dualist. Somebody asked somebody, I think one more place we had found that. Has a Swamiji used anywhere the example of a rope and snake, which Shankar is always using? And we have found already one place, and here we are finding it again. We had found it in the London lectures. A rope is taken for a snake. He who sees the rope as the snake, for him the rope has vanished, and when the delusion ceases and he looks at the rope, the snake has vanished. Delusion vanished, wrong knowledge has gone. If you throw light on it. What happens to that alata, that moving torch? Gaudapad says that because it is moving, you see the circle. There is no circle, we accept. But we have not seen the truth. You do not move this torch. If moving has created the delusion, stop the torch, you will see the light constant. Not that there is nothing, not that everything is changing, the light is there. So we call that chapter Alata Shanti. There is then but one all-comprehending existence, Astitva, and that one appears as manifold. So, this Advaitism, we shall see, some just shown how that has reconciled both. But now we will follow this art of Advaita further on the next turn. Om Paratatve Sada Lino Ramakrishna Samagya Yo Dharma Sthapana Rato Viresham Tam Namamyaham. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Tat Sat. Shri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.